The smell of burnt metal lingered in the corridor, acrid and thick, as Captain Dyer led the squad through the derelict alien ship. Every step echoed. Outside, the stars flickered, indifferent. "Keep close," Dyer muttered, his voice low but firm. The team's breathing was heavy in the silence, a mixture of fear and exhaustion. This wasn't their first raid. It wouldn't be their last. Up ahead, Specialist Flores tapped her scanner. "Getting readings from the next chamber. Looks like another biopod." Dyer nodded. "Prep charges." Flores hesitated. "Captain, do we really need to—" "Follow orders," he snapped, eyes hard. "You want them to find us first?" Flores flinched, but didn't argue. She dropped to one knee, setting up the explosives. The others looked on, faces tight with the same unspoken tension. They all knew what was inside those pods. Civilians, unarmed aliens, part of a species who had never fired the first shot. But survival wasn't about fairness. It was about who acted first. The charge blinked red, then green. "Clear." Dyer waved them back, and the blast rocked the ship, flames licking the walls. The door to the chamber crumbled. Inside, the pods hissed, their occupants stirring as oxygen returned. Dyer could see them through the glass, small, fragile beings, far from the monsters their superiors described. But to Earth Command, all aliens were threats, potential enemies. After the devastation back home, that had become the only truth. "Finish it," Dyer ordered. His voice was colder than he intended. Corporal Anders stepped forward, rifle raised, his hands trembling slightly. Dyer saw it and hated himself, hated all of this. "I said finish it." Anders pulled the trigger. The pods shattered one by one, a quick spray of plasma. It was done in seconds. Silence fell again, but it felt heavier now, pressing in on them all. Flores stood, her lips tight. "They're not soldiers, Captain." Dyer clenched his jaw. "They're resources. That's what command says. We take what we can, or we die next. You want that?" She shook her head, staring at the bodies. "No, sir." They moved on, deeper into the ship, gathering what tech they could. The war had dragged on for decades now, and Earth was running dry. Every resource stolen was another day humanity survived. At least, that's what they told themselves. But Dyer knew better. He could see the truth in the eyes of his crew. This wasn't about survival anymore. It was about power, control. Maybe it always had been. They reached the central chamber, the heart of the ship. Here, the control panel blinked softly, casting pale light over the dark walls. It would fetch a good price back at command. A month's worth of rations, at least. Dyer keyed in the code for extraction, waiting as the drone lifted the panel. In the distance, the ship creaked, its systems failing. They had to leave soon. Flores stood beside him, her face pale. "Do you ever wonder if it's worth it?" Dyer turned to her, frowning. "What?" "This. All of it. I mean, if they weren't here, the aliens, wouldn't we still be doing this? To each other?" Dyer froze. He hadn't expected that, not from Flores. But the question sank into his gut, heavy and undeniable. He remembered the early days of the war, before they'd discovered the alien fleets. Back when the enemy had been other human factions, each fighting for control over dwindling resources. The battles had been just as bloody, the justifications just as hollow. "We're protecting Earth," he said, but the words felt thin like ash on his tongue. "Are we?" Flores's eyes searched his face. "Or just using that as an excuse?" Dyer didn't answer. He couldn't. The ship groaned again, the walls shaking. "Let's move!" he barked, pushing ahead, eager to escape the weight of her question. As they boarded their shuttle and drifted away from the wreckage, Dyer looked out the window. The stars were still there, cold and distant, but they felt different now. For the first time, Dyer wondered if it wasn't the enemy out there that humanity needed to fear. Maybe it was the one staring back from the mirror, and deep down he knew that the next war, whether against aliens or humans, was already waiting.